Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MonoBlueTron, back again with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. Well, it has been exactly 20 episodes since I last looked at Hero, and my hero alarm is going off, so today we're going to play a little of Isolde Hero. Now what makes now a good time to look at this list? Well, Isolde Hero just topped the Fargo Regional, so I'm going to give you an exceedingly less rare glimpse into what I would be playing were I piloting this deck. So here's the list, and I promise there's a reason I'm playing the worst of some of these equip spells. As always, I'll give you a little bit of background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and as always, the card by card. So firstly, for those of you that don't know, Masked Hero is an archetype that I should seriously consider entering a domestic partnership with at this point. It's an archetype completely owned and operated by elemental heroes Shadow Mist and their compatriot Dark Law. The deck's gone through several different iterations, Protect the Dark Law, totally awesome hero, but since Master Rule 4, the archetype has had trouble competing because it can't make the toad-inclusive boards that would keep Danky alive, and it certainly can't summon enough monsters to push for lethal. Until now, we've got an extra deck monster, and unlike Wonder Driver, it's already been printed. Isolde, A Tale of Two Noble Knights is a warrior link monster with 2 points in the ability to both add a warrior from your deck to your hand, as well as special summon a warrior from your deck, provided you send the same number of different equipped spells to the graveyard as the number of stars that monster has. That means we're going to have to be playing 4 separate Garnets to summon Shadow Mist, but don't worry, I have a way around it. Our equip suite is Malevolent Nuzzler, Moon Mirror Shield, Horn of the Unicorn, and Sword of the Deep-Seated, which we can all equip to a Vion before linking him away for Isolde, placing those cards snugly from our grave back onto the top of our deck with their effects, so we can then activate Isoldes. From our 1-card combo of Vion, we can assemble a board in our opponent's standby phase of Isolde, Dark Law, an available Malicious in grave, and a BLS and Honest in hand. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First, we've got 3 Vions and 3 Vion brand vegan substitutes, Armageddon Knight. Next, the card that they're almost always sending, 3 Destiny Hero Malicious. Finally, our hero suite rounds out with 3 copies of Shadow Mist and 1 Honesty Neos. We're also playing 2 Summoner Monk to try and relive the good old days, and 1 Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, to get off of Isolde's first effect. The rest of our monsters are hand traps, with a priority placed on Light for Blackluster Soldier, 3 Ghost Ogre, and 3 Effect Veiler. For spells, we've got 3 copies of A Hero Lives, 2 copies of Mask Change, 3 Cosmic Cyclone, 3 Scapegoat, 1 each of Foolish, Reborn, and Rhoda, and our Garnets, the Quadra Suite, 1 copy of Moon Mirror Shield, 1 copy of Horn of the Unicorn, 1 copy of Malevolent Nuzzler, and 1 copy of Sword of the Deep-Seated. Now, unfortunately, Sword also goes to the top of the deck if it's sent from deck, but the Shadow Mist search that we get in standby means we're unlikely to draw it. In the extra, we've got 1 Masked Hero Anki, 2 Darklaw, 1 Baguska, 1 Tornado, 1 Dweller for 4s, then Borreload, Saruya, Decode, 2 copies of Isolde, Mrs. Radiant, Proxy Dragon, Link Spider, and Link Haribo. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first match is going to be up against Dino Doll, and Dino Doll is exactly what we want to be across the table from in terms of meta decks. It's incredibly reliant on the graveyard, it tries to add a card to its hand about 4 times every turn, and most importantly, it's not playing hand traps. Our opponent gets to go first. They're going to normal summon this copy of Armageddon Knight, trying to send a Codals to graveyard. We're going to chain this Effect Veiler, and they will pass it back to us. That's really good news because we have a Vion in hand, which means we can do whatever we want. We'll start by normal summoning a copy of Vision Hero Vion, sending a Malicious to graveyard, and then using its effect to get another Malicious from our deck. We'll then link into Isolde, use her first effect to get a BLS to our hand, and our second to send all of these garbage equips from our deck to the graveyard to special summon a copy of Shadow Mist. That's going to get us a Mask Change, and this Sword of the Deep-Seated is going back to the top of our deck, but not for long, because of course this deck will be shuffled once we flip this Mask Change and Darklaw makes an appearance. Our opponent's going to activate a copy of Fossil Dig. We will chain Mask Change, trying to get whatever they add to their hand. They add a second copy of Overraptor, which is good news for them because we happen to hit a copy of Overraptor off of our Darklaw's activation. Our opponent normal summons a second Overraptor and will Mask Change again, trying to get whatever they add to hand because of course they can't add it to graveyard, and what do we hit but, oh no, Giant Rex! Okay, well now they're going to go into Utopia the Lightning, locking us out of Honesty Neos, but that's not a big deal. We're still probably favored in this game, especially with a BLS in our hand. We're going to go ahead and special summon that BLS, then use the effect of Malicious for another Malicious, normal summon a Vion, and go to battle phase. We'll attack over this Utopia, use the effect of BLS to attack again, attack with Isolde, attack with Malicious, and then hit him for lethal with Honesty Neos. Game 2 is up against Spiral, and unfortunately our opponent has drawn 2 hand traps. This deck can play excellently through 1, but 2 is a little more problematic. Of course, this lacks the resiliency of previous hero builds, so we're going to do our best. We have a copy of Mask Change in hand, which ends up being pretty critical. We're going to go ahead and normal summon this copy of Vision Hero Vion, send a Malicious to graveyard, then get a Malicious from our deck. We'll link into Isolde, use her first effect, and whoo, there's the Ghost Ogre before we can get those bad equips out of our deck. They're then going to Droll and Lockbird, but that's still fine with us. We'll get our third copy of Malicious, set a Mask Change, and then flip it in our standby phase. phase. Our opponent's going to start by normal summoning a copy of Tough and using its effect. We will effect failure in response because I really want this guy to live. They will pass it back to us after setting one card. Thankfully, we can go off from this position with this copy of BLS in our hand, and I think our opponent elects just to let the game end rather than play this one out. We send a copy of Vion in order to get a copy of Shadow Mist to the graveyard and an Honesty Neos to our hand. We're going to attack twice with BLS, once with Darklaw, and then once with Vion, pumping it to 3,500 and winning. Alright, so it's time for Game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent is playing Trickstars, which is really bad news for us. Trickstars have such a small engine that they are afforded the ability to play a lot of hand traps, and if our opponent draws more than one of them, our goose may be cooked. We get to go first, which is good at least. We're going to fire off a Hero Lives, probably fine to do in the dark, but maybe not versus the format's de facto burn deck. We're going to go ahead and add a copy of Mask Change to our hand, and there is Droll Unlock, so we'll just set one card and pass it back. We'll flip this Mask Change in standby so that we can get the effect of Shadow Mist, adding a copy of Honesty Neos to hand. Our opponent's going to Pot of Desires, and we rip a copy of Monster Reborn out of their hand. That gives them a go-ahead for the Light Stage. They're going to use Light Stage for Candina, get a second copy of Licaricica, and what do you know, they don't have an out to a 2,400 attack monster, the one big weakness of Trickstar, its inability to out big dudes. Now, we probably can win from this position. We're going to start by activating this Honesty Neos in main phase so that we have light fodder in graveyard for this Blackluster Soldier. Unfortunately, it's going to get Solemn Judgmented, and now we're just going to try and put some guys in attack position to get over the Licorices. We're going to have to flip up this Monster Reborn that we set, trying to prompt what I expected to be a copy of Reincarnation, now, of course, very susceptible to this copy of Light Stage. Our opponent's going to normal summon Candina, get another copy of Licorice. They're going to Licorice in response to our Darklaw effect, and we hit the Candina. Fantastic. Unfortunately, this Pot of Desires finds 2 Scapegoat, the last card in the deck that could beat me. I don't think we really have an out to Scapegoat. We can't possibly beat Borreload Dragon. We get a copy of Vion to hand, and knowing that probably one of these is Scapegoat, at least we're going to have to do our best to play around it. We draw Deep-Seated, of course, but that's not super bad because we can discard it for Summoner Monk. We're going to go ahead and do just that, get a Vion from deck, send a copy of Malicious to graveyard, and then banish Malicious for Malicious's own effect to get another Malicious. We'll go to battle phase, but unfortunately can't prompt out that activation of Scapegoat any earlier than we have to. We'll go into Isolde, use her effect in order to get a copy of Shadow Mist to our side of the board, then we'll return Sword of the Deep-Seated and get a Mask Change to hand, but without a Darklaw on field, that copy of Ghost Ogre is live. We're going to go ahead and use Malicious's effect, then go into a Decode Talker, a copy of Tornado Dragon, and oh, there's the Scapegoat chained in response. Well, not a lot we can do about that, and we're long past the battle phase. The very least, we can flip up this copy of Mask Change, sending our last Malicious for a Darklaw, but it's really not going to be enough. They're going to go into a copy of Mrs. Radiant, a copy of Link Spider, a copy of Link Spider, and you've seen this before, Borreload Dragon. They'll go ahead and use the effect of Borreload Dragon to decrease the attack of our Darklaw, get over for 1,100 and 800 and 200 for exact lethal. Alright, so time for Game 2, and unfortunately we have bricked. Thankfully, so has our opponent, Brickstars, am I right? We get to go first, which is excellent. We're going to go ahead and set one Cosmic Cyclone, power play of the century, and pass it back. Our opponent's going to activate this Pot of Desires, get themselves a copy of Trickstar Light Stage. We will Cosmic Cyclone in response, which leaves the rest of their hand of Hand Traps and an Eater of Millions effectively dead. We'll be on the receiving end of Eater of Millions beatdown, but I think I can deal with that. We draw into another Mask Change. Are you serious? Well, maybe we can bluff evenly matched. Our opponent decides to play a little conservatively and attack us for 15 instead of the 25 he could do with the Pot of Desires, but what does this pot find but 2 additional Droll Unlock birds? So, really Clash of the Titans right here. We'll set both of these changes as a bluff. It baits out one Cosmic Cyclone, but doesn't do a whole lot else. Here's another Eater of Millions, which we can make an attack 0 with our copy of Effect Veiler in hand, but we need something right now, and what do we draw but one of our many Garnets, a Malevolent Nuzzler. So, we're back with the deck. This deck has a resource problem. It is so consistent, but as soon as you have committed to a play, even if it gets interrupted, you're left with a deck that is just tons of garbage equip spells like bricky one-ofs. Even if your play is successful, there are still a lot of decks, like Trickstar, for example, that have an incredible ability to actually beat an unprotected 2400 attack Dingus. That said, the deck's got some pretty amazing lineups against a ton of meta decks. TD, Dino, hell, even Pendulums if you're going first, and it's a marked improvement over other attempts at this strategy. Just don't expect that one Darklaw is going to be able to get you there anytime soon. So that's that, and just 20 more episodes to go before another Hero episode. If you'd like to see me play the decks I make on this show on stream, I'm on twitch.tv/MonoBlueTron every Tuesday and Thursday from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and if you have an idea for a certain deck or archetype you want to see me play on this show, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you Monday.